Thanks. Senator Waters.
I live in Brisbane, so I've got some questions about flight noise around the Brisbane Airport and Greater Brisbane, and I'm asking them on behalf of the Brisbane Flight Path Community Alliance, who I'm no doubt sure you're very familiar with their advocacy. So first of all, some questions in relation to the Senate inquiry into aircraft noise 2024 recommendations. What is the status of the department's implementation of each of the 21 recommendations from the Senate inquiry?
Senator, the government is yet to respond to the inquiry.
Yes, so what is the status?
Well, Ms Natty might have more, but essentially we are in the process of providing advice to government in response to the inquiry. There are, of course, a number of recommendations which reflect initiatives that have already been undertaken by government, but the response is in development.
Yeah. When was it due?
Senator, indicatively, a response is normally due back within 3 months.
Yes, so when was that?
The 3-month mark would be later this week, and it's indicative only, it isn't a hard deadline.
No, I'm not so sure it's an indicative deadline, but that's not the substance of my question, but I think the community would be very disappointed if the deadline was not adhered to. So is there an intention to have it completed by that deadline at the end of the week?
The government's response is currently being drafted, Senator.
Yes, and so when are you anticipating having it finished?
I haven't got a date yet, Senator.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not seeking to meet the 3-month time frame?
Can I just ask a follow-up?
No, I've got the call.
We are doing our best to do the drafting in consultation with a number of other agencies who are also named in those recommendations.
Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
We're doing our best to coordinate the government's response, noting that we have to coordinate with a number of other agencies who are also noted in those recommendations. Okay. So it isn't only the department responding, the department is coordinating a response for government.
Okay. And those others also know about the 3-month time frame.
If I may, I've been advised that we will be responding as soon as possible. So,
do you have any sense
what
of what
advised.
That means,
yes.
Minister?
That's about as far as I can go at this point in time,
okay.
Senator Waters.
All right. Well, it is being watched very closely, so please respond as soon as possible, ideally within the time frame. Have you initiated research into the health impacts of aircraft noise exposure on human health, including sleep disruption and associated economic costs, as recommended in Recommendation 2 of the inquiry report? Has that one commenced?
Just having a look at Recommendation 2.
Research into the health impacts of aircraft noise exposure on human health, including sleep disruption and associated economic costs.
Senator, is your question, has the department initiated any of those actions?
Yes. Have you started the research?
No, the department has not commenced anything of that nature.
And are you going to?
So as my colleague Mr Wood has said, we will be responding on behalf of the government to each of the recommendations in turn.
Okay. How are you ensuring that the continuous descent and climb operations become the standard at major airports, as outlined in Recommendation 5?
I might just pass to my colleague, Mr Small.
Thank you. Scott Small, Acting Assistant Secretary of Airports Branch. The Recommendation 5 is under consideration, and we are working with Air Services and CASA on responses to provide advice to government on that. It'll be a decision for government if they accept that recommendation or how they respond to that.
Okay. And what time frame are you working to give that advice to government?
Senator, as Ms Natty said, we are working as fast as possible to provide that advice.
Right. Okay. Has the department mandated yet that nighttime aircraft operations at Brisbane Airport comply with ICAO Chapter 14 Balanced Approach Noise Management Rules, which is in Recommendation 6?
Yeah. Senator, the balanced approach to aircraft noise recommended by ICAO is a series of measures that effectively recommends that the first way of treating noise is at the source, so aircraft design, aircraft engines, those sorts of things. It runs through a number of other opportunities to address aircraft noise, land use planning, operational measures, and as a last resort operational restrictions. I think Australia's approach to aircraft noise has effectively been consistent with that approach for many years. So, for example, Chapter 2 aircraft, the effectively noisiest and older aircraft are no longer allowed to operate in Australia.
Okay, and nighttime aircraft operations in particular, has that been mandated?
Well, I think, and others may have more, but
I'm sorry, could you speak up for me a little, or perhaps hand so
of course, Senator.
Thank you.
I think the point that I'm making is that the approach to aircraft noise in Australia is consistent with the ICAO balanced approach to noise. We take into account all of those types of mitigations for aircraft noise, be it restrictions on aircraft types, which is something that is done through ICAO, through noise and through aircraft noise standards, albeit through land use planning restrictions.
Okay, so it is mandated, or it's not mandated, but you do it anyway?
Well, I think different aspects of it are mandated. Again, aircraft noise standards are mandated and have been for many years through the air navigation aircraft noise regulations. So the recommendation, I'm not sure there is a specific element of that recommendation to mandate. It's an approach, a set of principles.
It's Recommendation 6, which suggests that the department mandates nighttime aircraft operations at Brisbane Airport comply with ICAO Chapter 14 Balanced Approach Noise Management Rules.
Yes, Senator, that's the recommendation, but the balanced approach is essentially a set of principles, and there are a set of principles that are effectively already in place through Australia, through various noise approaches in Australia.
Okay. I think the community lacks confidence that they're being complied with, hence the suggestion for them to be mandated. So that was why I'm asking you whether they're mandated, but I think you're saying no.
Well, I think they're being mandated in a range of different ways. I mean, the ICAO balanced approach does not specifically mandate a type of regulatory approach for specific airports. It's a set of guidance on the types of mitigations that can be put in place to respond to aircraft noise.
Okay. Can I move now quickly to the Aviation White Paper? What's the current status of the implementation of the noise-related recommendations in that 2024 Aviation White Paper?
Senator, just being joined by my colleague Mr Vincent. There are a number of actions or initiatives that were in the white paper. While Mr Vincent finds his notes, I will start with Initiative 33. Need some glasses. So Initiative 33 is to improve transparency about aircraft noise impacts. And there are several things that are underway. There's the Minister's Statement of Expectations to Air Services Australia under the Air Services Act of 1995 outlines the government's expectations. Air Services, and you may want to speak with them later as well, Air Services are working to include additional information, and the department understands that additional information regarding Brisbane in particular has been included, and that they will publish a quarterly report on that.
Okay, thank you. I do have a series of questions for Air Services later on tonight. I think there's more than just Initiative 33, though, is there not?
Yes, there is. Yep. Just hand to Mr Vincent to continue, Senator.
Ben Vincent, Assistant Secretary, Domestic Policy and Programs Branch. As you're aware, Senator, the Aviation White Paper included a number of initiatives intended to enable a balanced approach to airport planning and noise. Work is underway on all of those. As Ms Natty just mentioned, Air Services Australia is progressing a range of initiatives around the appointment of an executive for noise and environment, around enhancements to the noise and flight path monitoring system, around best practice consultation in accordance with the community engagement standard. Beyond that, there are initiatives around developing guidance on flying considerately for aircraft operating under visual flight flight rules or outside of controlled airspace to minimise noise impacts. Work is on foot on that. There is scoping work underway around updates to guidelines for community aviation consultation groups. There's a fair bit of activity on foot.
Okay, thank you. So there's a bit underway. Are there any that have been completed?
Let me check, Senator. Sorry, wrong part of my brief. I think, actually, let me just check and I'll confirm. Okay. I believe that in terms of Initiative 37, improve engagement with communities affected by changes to airspace and flight paths, that one is complete. Air Services Australia is applying the community engagement standard in consultation processes. I believe that, and Air Services will be better placed to discuss this a bit later, but I do believe that an executive has now been appointed for noise and environment too.
Okay, thanks. I'll take both of those up with Air Services later on. Will the department consider introducing legally binding noise thresholds for airports across Australia?
I think that would be a matter for government, Senator.
Okay, are you doing any policy work to examine what that might look like and entail?
I'm very much focused in my area, Senator, on delivery of the initiatives outlined in the white paper.
Okay. So is anyone doing any work on considering legally binding noise thresholds for airports? No. Okay.
No, Senator.
What support and compensation will be given to communities affected by noise exposure if airports fail to meet noise abatement targets?
That's not something that we're currently considering, Senator.
Are you assuming that they will meet those targets and therefore you don't need to think about compensation and support for what happens when they don't?
I think your question, Senator, assumes that there is legally binding noise targets, and I don't believe that to be current policy or legislative in the legislative framework.
Okay.
But to go to that issue, one of those initiatives around enhancing the noise and flight path monitoring system will see more public reporting on non-compliance with noise abatement procedures at major airports.
Okay, thank you.
So your
And what?
will be confirmed with public.
That's right. So you'll be validated on a website. That's great. What progress has been made, if any, in working with the National Airports Safeguarding Advisory Group to update the National Airports Safeguarding Framework by 2027?
So, Senator, are you referring to, I just want to check that I'm on the right page with you, Initiative 36 relating to improving land use planning outcomes near airports?
If that's the one that's about working with National Airports Safeguarding Advisory Group to update the National Airports Safeguarding Framework, then yes.
Yes. So there is a review of the safeguarding framework through the period 2025 to 2027. There are under development education materials for local planning officials this year in 2025. And then the third part of that relates to updating the Australian Standard on Building, Siting and Construction in relation to aircraft noise intrusion, also known as or related to AS 2021-2015, the acoustics aircraft noise intrusion through Standards Australia. And any review of that standard is a matter for Standards Australia.
Okay, thank you.